"Get your filthy hands off my glass. I don't want someone like you touching anything I paid for." The words sliced through the hum of soft piano music and candlelight like a whip crack. Heads turned. Forks froze mid-air. The speaker, a silver-haired man in a tailored navy suit, didn't lower his voice. If anything, he said it louder, so that everyone in the room could hear just how far beneath him he believed she was. Lana Brooks didn't flinch. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. But tonight, something was different. Something didn't feel right, not just in her chest, but in the air itself. The wine in the glass shimmered under the chandelier's golden glow, crimson and rich, but there was something off. Something sharp in the scent. Something wrong. Her heart beat once. Then again, louder. She moved. With one swift motion, Lana slapped the glass clean out of Jonathan Creed's hand. It shattered against the white marble like a gunshot. Red wine sprayed across the tablecloth like blood. A collective gasp filled the air. Then silence. Deafening, explosive silence. And Lana's voice, clear and unwavering, rose to cut through it. "It's poison. That wine. It's been tampered with." Every guest stared. A few reached for their phones. Creed stood frozen, face pale, eyes wide in disbelief. The same billionaire CEO who had just demanded she stay away from his table was now staring at her like she was the only person in the world who could speak. Security surged forward. The restaurant manager looked like he might faint. Lana stayed where she was, her breathing slow but steady, eyes never leaving the man who had called her less than human just 60 seconds ago. Because this wasn't about pride. It wasn't about paychecks or power. It was about saving a life. This is the kind of black story people don't expect, but need to hear. A story about instinct, injustice, and integrity. And if you've ever wondered what real courage looks like, stick around. This story is going to change how you see everything. Lana Brooks was the kind of woman people noticed, but not always for the reasons she deserved. At 24, she had the kind of presence that made a room pause. Not because she demanded attention, but because she carried herself like someone who knew her worth, even when the world tried to convince her otherwise. Her dark skin glowed under soft lighting. Her posture was straight, shoulders strong. And her eyes, sharp, observant, layered with a calm defiance, held the kind of quiet power you can't fake. Born and raised in Atlanta, Lana grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with her mother, a night shift nurse who believed in discipline, honesty, and the power of science. Her father passed when she was 7, an accident on a construction site that left no insurance and a lifetime of grief. It was just the two of them after that. But Lana was different, even back then. She read medical journals for fun. She'd stay up at night watching TED Talks about genetics and cell therapy while other kids were watching cartoons. Her dream was always the same, to become a doctor, not for status, but to understand the human body, to bring healing where others saw only statistics. She made it into college on a partial scholarship, majoring in biology with a pre-med track. For a while, it felt like the world was finally catching up to who she was. But life has a way of testing even the strongest spirits. Just after her sophomore year, her mother was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. Medical bills stacked up faster than textbooks. Lana tried to juggle classes, work, and caregiving, but reality won. She dropped out, full-time caregiver by day, restaurant server by night. After her mother passed, she took custody of her younger brother, Malik. He was 16 then, still in high school, and she refused to let his future unravel like hers had. Lana moved them to Savannah, found a job at one of the city's elite restaurants, and quietly rebuilt a life around survival and sacrifice. She never told anyone at work she'd once aced organic chemistry. No one knew that she still studied in secret, borrowing medical books from the public library, watching free lectures online, solving case studies for fun. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a scientist in exile. A daughter, a sister, a protector. And whether the world saw it or not, she still carried her dream in the quiet rhythm of her every move. Because Lana Brooks never stopped believing that knowledge could save lives. even if no one else believed in her yet. Jonathan Creed had built an empire with his bare hands, or so he liked to say. At 63, he was the founder and CEO of Creed Bio, one of the largest pharmaceutical corporations in North America. His net worth hovered near $3 billion, give or take a market dip. He wore his wealth like armor. Custom suits, Italian shoes, watches that cost more than most people made in a year. He spoke with the clipped confidence of a man who had never once been told no, without a price tag attached. But underneath the business magazines and boardroom victories lived something far older. Something darker. Creed was born into old money, raised in Connecticut by a father who believed a man's value could be measured by the whiteness of his collar and the color of his skin. His upbringing was rooted in quiet superiority. The kind that didn't shout slurs in the street, but whispered judgments in private clubs and exclusive schools. He learned early that power meant distance. And distance, in his world, meant never letting people see your weaknesses or your prejudice. To the public, Creed was a philanthropist. He funded cancer research, sponsored educational programs, even sat on the board of several diversity initiatives. But behind closed doors, his true beliefs often slipped through. A sarcastic comment here, a dismissive glance there, especially when it came to women of color. He considered them inferior, not openly, but in the way that mattered most. He assumed their competence was luck, their ambition, arrogance, their presence in luxury spaces, an inconvenience. That night at the restaurant, when he saw Lana Brooks approach his table, all he saw was a stereotype. A black waitress in a starched apron, nothing more. He didn't see her poise, or the intelligence in her eyes. He didn't see the years of sacrifice, the knowledge, the strength. And when he told her to keep her filthy hands off his glass, it wasn't about germs. It was about power. Jonathan Creed believed he was untouchable. Too rich to be challenged, too important to be corrected. He had forgotten that danger doesn't always come from boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. Sometimes, it walks quietly, wearing an apron, carrying a tray. And sometimes, it's not danger at all. Sometimes, it's the only person brave enough to save your life. It started with the smell. Not strong, not obvious. Just a faint hint, so subtle that most people would have ignored it. But Lana didn't. She was trained, not formally, not with a degree, but with real-life experience that most medical students never touch. Years of caregiving had sharpened her senses. Watching her mother fade, monitoring every dose of morphine, every change in appetite, every reaction to treatment, those were lessons no classroom could teach. And now, standing beside a man who had just insulted her in front of a dozen diners, those lessons whispered something alarming. As Lana set down the wine, she noticed the bottle. It was vintage, yes, but the label was smudged, as if someone had tried to wipe it clean. The foil around the cork wasn't sealed properly. And the bottle hadn't come from the wine cellar. She knew because she'd seen the sommelier that night. This wasn't one of his. The wine itself was room temperature, not chilled like it should have been. And then there was the color. A shade too dark. Not by much, but enough for someone who'd spent years studying liquids, from prescription meds to nutrient broths, to see the difference. And then came the scent. Bitter almonds. Her heart thudded once, hard. Cyanide. It couldn't be, right? It had to be something else. Maybe kitchen cleaner? Maybe she was just on edge. But the smell wasn't in the air around her, it was coming from the glass. Lana's fingers tightened slightly on the tray. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to keep her head down, to let the world keep spinning the way it always did, with people like Creed sneering at people like her. But her mother's voice echoed in her mind, quiet but firm. If you see something wrong, you don't just walk away. You act. Lana's breath caught in her throat as she watched Creed lift the glass. His mouth opened slightly, ready to sip. She had seconds. Maybe less. And in that moment, she didn't think about her job, or the consequences, or what people might say. She thought only of saving a life. So she moved. and everything changed. The moment the wine glass shattered, time stopped. Every head in the restaurant turned. The soft clink of silverware and the quiet murmur of polite conversation vanished into stunned silence. A collective breath was held, suspended in the tension now crackling through the air like static. Jonathan Creed jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. His voice rang out, sharp and furious. "She attacked me. She just assaulted me in front of everyone. Somebody call the police." He pointed a shaking finger at Lana, his face flushed with rage, his eyes wild with disbelief. For a moment, no one moved. Then the restaurant manager hurried over, panic already rising in his voice. "Lana, what have you done? You just dumped a $1,000 glass of wine on Mr. Creed." Lana didn't back away. She didn't apologize. Instead, she took one step forward, her voice steady, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. "It smelled like bitter almonds," she said. "That's the signature scent of cyanide. I couldn't let him drink it." A soft ripple of murmuring began around the room. Security moved in, cautious but firm, hands hovering near their radios. Creed's face twisted with fury. "This is insane. This woman is crazy. She should be arrested." Someone in the back of the room pulled out their phone, already recording. Another guest whispered to her date. "Did she say poison?" The whisper spread like wildfire. Poison. The word changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't just about spilled wine or bruised egos. Now it was about danger. About whether this black waitress, who had been treated like nothing just minutes ago, might have actually saved the life of one of the most powerful men in the city. And that shift, subtle at first, began to settle over the room. Guests looked between Lana and Creed, between the broken glass and the wine-stained tablecloth. They replayed the scene in their minds, remembered how the bottle looked, how the waiter who brought it seemed nervous, rushed. Some remembered hearing about poisons that smelled sweet, almost like almonds. Cyanide, wasn't it? The restaurant manager hesitated. His tone shifted. "We should probably have the wine tested, just to be sure." Creed scoffed, but didn't protest. Lana stood still, surrounded by suspicion but not defeat. The insult she'd just endured was still fresh in the air, but now, so was something else. Doubt. And doubt, when paired with truth, has a way of flipping every script. The police arrived within minutes. The restaurant's pristine calm had already been shattered, but the flashing red and blue lights outside confirmed it. Something serious had happened here. Officers stepped inside, all business. One spoke to Jonathan Creed, who was still fuming, his shirt now speckled with red drops from the spilled wine. Another approached Lana, asking her to explain, slowly and clearly, exactly what had happened. Lana repeated her words carefully. "It smelled like bitter almonds. That's not a scent you ignore. I believe the wine was tampered with." At first, the officers exchanged glances, doubt, curiosity, then something else. One of them requested the remaining wine bottle and glass to be sealed and sent out for a rapid chemical screening. Another officer quietly called in the city's hazmat team to be safe. Procedures were followed. Gloves, evidence bags, chain of custody forms. Jonathan scoffed as he watched them work. "This is absurd. That girl is trying to create drama. You really think someone tried to poison me? In a 5-star restaurant?" No one answered him. Because the test results came back faster than anyone expected. The attending officer, young, alert, and clearly rattled, read the preliminary findings out loud. His voice cracked just slightly. Positive for hydrogen cyanide. Traceable levels in the wine and residue on the broken glass. Estimated concentration. Lethal. Gasps filled the dining room like a wave. Even Creed went silent. The confirmation sucked the air from the room. Suddenly, Lana's instinct wasn't just a lucky guess, it was a life-saving warning. A dozen smartphones had caught the moment she struck the glass from his hand. Now those same phones captured something else entirely. The look on Creed's face as he realized the truth. He was seconds away from death. And the person he had humiliated, the woman he had insulted and dismissed, was the only reason he was still breathing. The restaurant manager stumbled backward, stammering an apology to Lana. Security stepped away from her without a word, and across the room, you could feel the shift. The room no longer saw her as just a waitress. They saw her as what she truly was. A protector. A scientist in disguise. A woman who'd risked everything to do the right thing. And outside, as the rain began to fall softly on Savannah's cobblestone streets, it was clear, this black story had just begun. Even with the chaos subsiding, the truth was just beginning to surface. As officers secured the evidence and the restaurant staff scrambled to make statements, one detail refused to sit still in the minds of investigators: the wine bottle. It hadn't come from the restaurant's official cellar. The sommelier swore he'd never seen that label in their inventory. So where had it come from? The waiter who delivered it, a temporary staffer hired through a third-party service, had vanished the moment the commotion began. Security footage showed him slipping out the back door, ditching his apron, and melting into the streets of Savannah. But not before the cameras caught a clear image of his face. It only took a few hours. The man's name was Christopher Knox. A minor criminal record, history of working odd hospitality jobs under fake names. No known address. But what really caught the attention of the authorities was his bank account. 2 days before the incident, Knox received a wire transfer, $75,000. The sender? A shell corporation based in Delaware. A company with no website, no listed employees, and only one known point of contact: Logan Price. Logan wasn't just anyone. He was the executive vice president of Creed Bio, second in command to Jonathan Creed himself. A man known for his ambition, charm, and the cold efficiency of a machine. He'd been with the company for over a decade. Loyal, trusted, and ruthless behind closed doors. But what few people knew, at least until now, was that Logan had been quietly pushing for Creed's early retirement. Insiders whispered that he wanted full control. And Creed, for all his arrogance, had begun suspecting that his protege was moving against him. What Creed didn't know was how far Logan was willing to go. FBI cyber forensics connected the shell company to a trail of encrypted emails. Messages discussing a final solution, the need for discretion, references to insurance, and clearing the path. The evidence was damning. Jonathan Creed had nearly died not from some random act, but from a calculated hit ordered by the very man he mentored. And the only reason the plan failed was because a young black woman, treated like furniture in his world, had noticed what no one else did. The mastermind wasn't in the shadows anymore. And neither was Lana Brooks. Jonathan Creed sat in the back of the ambulance, his tailored suit stained, his ego bruised far worse than his pride wanted to admit. The world he'd built on power, polish, and control had just been cracked open by a woman he hadn't even thought worthy of eye contact 2 hours ago. The same woman who now stood quietly just beyond the flashing lights, wrapped in a blanket someone had handed her, answering a detective's questions with calm precision. He watched her. Not out of suspicion, not anymore, but something else. Something slower. Sharper. Same. For most of his life, Creed had learned to ignore people like Lana Brooks. Not out of malice, he told himself, but out of habit. It was easy to assume that the server refilling his glass or clearing his plate was background noise, just another part of the scenery. They weren't supposed to matter. They weren't supposed to be sharp, or brave, or brilliant. But Lana had been all three, and more. She had risked everything in a moment of gut instinct and quiet courage. She had stared down a room full of wealth and power and still chosen to do what was right. Creed couldn't stop thinking about how steady her hands were after the glass shattered. How sure her voice had been when she spoke about cyanide, about almonds, about a danger no one else had even seen. He thought about the words he'd thrown at her earlier. Filthy hands. Stay away. Now, those same hands had saved his life. That realization settled deep into his bones, unsettling in ways that spreadsheets and lawsuits never had. Creed had spent decades preaching innovation, talking about the future, sitting on panels about ethics and equity in medicine. But when confronted with someone like Lana, real, present, intelligent, he'd failed the most basic test of character. He hadn't seen her. And now, seeing her fully, he couldn't look away. As the paramedic checked his vitals, Creed turned to the officer beside him. "Has she given a statement?" "She's speaking with lead detectives now," the officer replied. "Sharp kid. Knew her chemistry better than most techs we've worked with." Creed nodded slowly. "What's her name?" "Lana Brooks." He repeated it to himself, quietly. Not as a reminder, but as a reckoning. The next morning, the restaurant was closed. The news had already made national headlines. Billionaire CEO nearly poisoned, saved by Waitress. It was all over morning television, social media, and financial news reports. Everyone had a take. Some praised Lana as a hero. Others questioned whether it was real. But Jonathan Creed didn't care about headlines that day. He cared about finding Lana Brooks. She wasn't answering her phone. She had left before the reporters arrived, slipping quietly out of the chaos like a ghost. No interview. No spotlight. Just silence. It took a few phone calls, but by noon, Creed's assistant found her, working a double shift at the same restaurant, even though it had closed for investigation. She was scrubbing counters in the back kitchen when Creed walked in. No entourage. No bodyguards. Just him, and the truth he needed to say. Lana looked up and froze, unsure what to expect. Creed removed his coat, folded it neatly, and laid it on a nearby counter. "I owe you my life," he began, his voice low, stripped of the bravado she remembered from the night before. "And more than that, I owe you an apology." Lana blinked. She said nothing. Creed continued. "I judged you. Not for your actions, but for how you looked. For your job. For your skin. That's ugly truth, and it's mine to carry. But what you did, what you saw, saved me. And it made me see." He paused, then took a breath. "I'm offering you a full ride to the university of your choice. Tuition, housing, books. Everything. I have a fund set up for underrepresented voices in science. And I want to extend a formal invitation to join Creed Bio as a research trainee. Paid. Flexible hours. You'll have access to our labs, our people, our mentors." Lana shook her head gently. "Why me?" Creed looked her in the eyes. "Because you've already proven that when it matters, you act. You think like a scientist. And you have a moral compass this industry desperately needs." She exhaled slowly. The offer was overwhelming. It felt like hope, like something she had buried long ago just to survive. And maybe now, it was time to dig it back up. By the end of the week, Lana Brooks had become a household name. News outlets dubbed her the restaurant hero. Talk shows debated her bravery. Editorials praised her instincts, her composure, her refusal to stay silent when it mattered most. Some headlines leaned into drama: "Waitress saves billionaire from assassination," while others focused on race, gender, and class. The story struck a nerve. Because Lana wasn't just any waitress. She was a young black woman in a society where too often, black women are overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. But this time, the world had no choice but to look and listen. Clips of her knocking over the wine glass played on every screen. Slow-motion breakdowns aired during primetime news. Social media lit up with hashtags. Hashtag Lana Brooks, hashtag Black Heroine, hashtag Science Saved Lives. TikToks recreated the moment. Twitter flooded with messages of support. Instagram accounts posted quotes from her police statement over photos of broken glass and red wine stains. And yet, through it all, Lana remained quiet. She declined interviews. Turned down brand deals. Avoided the spotlight. Not out of fear, but out of principle. She hadn't acted for fame or fortune. She hadn't made a statement for attention. She had simply followed her instincts, her training, her truth. But not everyone praised her. As the attention grew, So did the backlash. Online trolls questioned her motives. Comment sections filled with racism, sexism, conspiracy theories. Was it staged? Was she lucky? Did she even know what cyanide smelled like? Lana didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her actions already had. What mattered more were the quiet moments, the emails from young girls saying she inspired them to pursue science. The thank you letters from doctors, chemists, and nurses who knew exactly how rare her insight had been. The phone call from a cancer researcher who admitted he hadn't trusted his own gut once, and lost a friend because of it. And perhaps most powerful of all, the letter from a mother in Chicago who wrote, "My daughter saw you on TV and said, 'She looks like me. Maybe I can be a scientist too.'" For Lana, that was the real headline. Because the story wasn't about a billionaire or a glass of poisoned wine. It was about possibility. And the ripple effect of one woman choosing to act when the world least expected her to. 1 year later, the spring sun spilled across the lawn of Savannah State University, casting a warm golden glow over rows of folding chairs and proud families gathered for commencement. The crowd erupted in applause as the dean read the next name. Lana Elise Brooks, Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Sciences, with honors. Lana walked across the stage with steady steps, her maroon cap tilted just slightly to the side, the golden tassel swaying in the breeze. Her smile was quiet, her eyes focused, but beneath that calm exterior lived a fire of emotion, relief, pride, memory. She had done it. Not because someone handed it to her. Not because of luck. But because when the world tried to bury her in silence and shadow, she chose to rise. To speak. To act. And in the audience, seated in the front row beside her younger brother Malik, sat Jonathan Creed. He wore no suit today. Just a simple blazer, no tie, a look of humility far more powerful than any designer brand. His face was calm, his posture reflective. As Lana crossed the stage, their eyes met briefly. No words were spoken, but both knew what it meant. After Lana accepted her diploma, the dean announced one final surprise. This year, we're honored to present the university's Humanitarian Achievement Award, recognizing extraordinary courage and service to others, to Ms. Lana Brooks. Another wave of applause. Lana stepped back up to the podium. She didn't speak long. Just a few words. But they cut deep. "I'm standing here because someone believed I wasn't worth noticing, and I acted anyway. Sometimes, doing the right thing means speaking up when everyone else stays quiet. And sometimes, the person the world tries to ignore is the one who ends up saving it." When she stepped down, Jonathan Creed rose from his seat. Without prompting, without a script, he walked up to the microphone. "I want to say something," he said, clearing his throat. He turned to the crowd. "Last year, I nearly lost my life, and I would have, if not for the woman we just honored. I misjudged her. I dismissed her. And she saved me anyway. That's not just courage. That's grace. And I will spend the rest of my life living up to the second chance she gave me." The audience fell silent. Then slowly, they stood. A standing ovation, not just for Lana's degree, or for her bravery, but for the story she had rewritten. Not as a victim, but as a voice the world could no longer ignore. Lana Brooks didn't set out to change the world. She didn't wake up that morning thinking she'd confront a billionaire, or that her quiet instincts would save a life and spark a national conversation. She didn't plan to become a symbol, a headline, or a hashtag. All she wanted was to do her job, protect her dignity, and get through another shift. But that's the thing about character. It doesn't wait for perfect moments. It shows up in the middle of ordinary days, in small decisions, in uncomfortable situations. Character whispers when the world is loud. And when no one's looking, it acts anyway. What Lana taught us, what she lived, is that courage doesn't always look like protest signs or courtroom speeches. Sometimes, it looks like knocking over a glass of wine, even when you know it might cost you everything. Sometimes, it means believing in your own voice, even when others try to silence it. A year after that night, Lana started a non-profit in her mother's name, the Elise Initiative. Its mission: to support young women of color pursuing careers in medicine and science. Mentorships, scholarships, hands-on workshops. Her first cohort included 20 high school girls from low-income neighborhoods. One of them had memorized Lana's speech by heart. And that's how change spreads. Not through fame. Through legacy. Through the lives touched quietly, one person at a time. So if you're watching this right now, maybe there's a Lana in your neighborhood. A young woman people overlook, someone who reads science books at the library and dreams quietly of doing something bigger. Maybe the next life-changing moment isn't waiting in a courtroom or a lab, but in a restaurant, a school hallway, or your own home. And maybe the only thing missing is someone willing to believe. If this story moved you, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more Black stories that remind us. Courage doesn't need permission, and character is the most powerful force in the world. Because sometimes, the person no one notices ends up becoming the one we'll never forget.